Hi there and welcome back to Northlight Photographic Workshops. My name is Bill Schwab and I am here with part 2 of the wet plate collodion instructional videos that I've been working on. The first one I put out a little earlier this week was on mixing up your silver nitrate bath, and there should be a link to that up here right now. Now this is part 2. This is the other most important chemical in the whole process here, and this is called collodion that we're going to be mixing up. Now the collodion, it comes pre-made. You can buy this stuff from several places: Mavidon, Artcraft Chemical, Bostic and Sullivan. But it needs to be salted, and it needs to be mixed further than when you just buy it in its normal USP configuration. So what we're going to be doing today is mixing up those collodion salts. Now, the thing is in this process, in this wet plate collodion process, there's many different formulas that people have come up with over the years. There's Workhorse, there's Quick Clear, these kind of things. There's different types of formulas that people use in their collodion, and many of them swear by their own formula, and they have formulas that are for different things. They adhere to glass better for doing ambrotypes, or they adhere to metal better, or they work under certain types of light better, that kind of thing. But what we're going to do here, and because this is kind of a beginner series of videos, we're going to work with what's known as the Quick Clear collodion. It's an easy one to mix up. It uses ammonium iodide and cadmium bromide, very small amounts, along with some ether, collodion USP, and some Everclear, and a very tiny amount of distilled water that we're going to be using to dissolve the cadmium bromide and the ammonium iodide. Now, before I get to that, some of the things that you're going to need are different glassware, beakers, graduated cylinders, things that you can measure out your solutions with, that kind of a thing. Because this is being mixed up in a two-part solution. We're going to be mixing up a part A and then a part B. And then we're going to be mixing those both together to make up the final bath of collodion that we'll be using. So we're going to need some glassware. Again, you're going to need a scale because we're going to be weighing out some small trace amounts of both the ammonium iodide and the cadmium bromide. Spoon's a good thing to have. Some sort of a measuring device for a small amount of liquid. We're going to be measuring out like 2 milliliters of liquids. And I like to use these graduated pipettes. These are fun things to do and fun things to use. Again, you're going to need some stirring rods. I like to use glass stirring rods to mix all of this up. We're going to need, of course, some ammonium iodide, and this can be purchased at several places, of which I will list a couple of them down below the video in the descriptions. We're going to also need some cadmium bromide, very small amount, but we're going to need that. Everclear, which tends to be the river that runs through everything in wet plate collodion photography. It's 190 proof pure grain alcohol. We're going to need some of that, and we're going to need, again, very small trace amounts of distilled water. I also like to have, when I'm measuring out my chemistry, I like to have small pieces of paper. I like to cut small squares of paper, just regular old typing paper. And what I do is I like to make a little crease in there. And what that's for is to measure on my scale, to measure my chemistry. And then I can just easily pour it into my beakers and then just throw that away. And that way it's a lot easier to deal with, and you don't have sediment of chemistry around, that kind of thing. And I think that's kind of it. So with that, it's time to get on our safety devices. As I say, our personal protection devices. As I say, you should never work with any of this without some gloves and without some glasses. So let's get those on right now. So now that that's done, we can get down to our mixing here. Now, one of the things that I didn't mention yet is that collodion is a mixture of nitrocellulose and ether. It's basically it gives off quite a fume. And when you've been around ether, you know it. You can smell it all over the place. If it bothers you, I would suggest getting some sort of a respirator, a filter with some either organic or chemical filters in it. That'll just wipe the smell away for you completely. I mean, other people really like it. One thing that you have to be careful about is using it in a very well-ventilated area. It tends to sink and settle down, so if you're working in a basement, be careful of that because the fumes will sink to the ground, to the floor, and if you fill up enough of it and it's flammable and your hot water heater turns on or something like that, you could have a problem. Now, I'm saying that to be the most scary as I can be because I want you to be careful. The thing is, you would have to have a lot of it to have that happen, but still be careful. I've worked in low ventilation areas with this before, and I've gotten kind of woozy and weak-kneed and thought I was poisoning myself until I got out in the fresh air and realized that it was just the ether in the collodion. So anyway, what I'm saying is that before I get to mixing up those parts of it, I like to mix up the chemistry, the chemicals, the cadmium bromide and the ammonium iodide first, before I go to those, just to keep them uncovered or keep them covered up for a little while so that the fumes don't get into the air. Anyway, so what we're going to be doing here is we're going to start off with our part A, which is going to be 60 milliliters of collodion, 40 milliliters of ether, I'm cheating, I've got it written down here, 3/4 of a gram of cadmium bromide, and 1 1/4 milliliters of water. Now that will be our part A. And then part B will be 1 gram of ammonium iodide, 1.25 milliliters of water, and 40 milliliters of Everclear. And once we've got all that mixed up, we mix it together into a nice solution that should turn a nice straw yellow, and it'll be almost ready to go. So let's get down to that. I'm going to turn on the scale here first, and actually I'm going to wait on that, and I'm going to measure out the amount of water that we're going to need in a small beaker so that we can mix up first I'm going to go with the cadmium bromide. So I said I need 1.25 milliliters of water. I'll put my trusty there we go. 1.25, and I like to put that water right down into my beaker and set that off aside, and then I'm going to go with my cadmium bromide first. Now another thing about these is that when you open up, there is definitely a smell to them, and it's best not to smell that if you can, so don't be sticking your nose in there and smelling it and that kind of thing. It's safe enough for you to have it open for a little while like this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my piece of paper on top of here, and I am going to tare my scale back to 0, and I am mixing out 0.75 grams of cadmium bromide. And there I am at half of what I need already. There we are. Actually, a little bit more for good measure. Okay. Then I set my spoon down. I like to seal up my chemistry again before I do anything else. Okay, and now I have my tiny amount of cadmium bromide here, which I'm going to drop down into this beaker of distilled water that we poured out a minute ago. And now that it's in there, I'm done with this piece of paper, and I will dispose of it safely. Now, I'm going to use one of my stirring rods now. Now, the cadmium bromide doesn't dissolve as easy as the ammonium iodide does. So sometimes it's good to even warm up this water a little bit, but you don't necessarily have to do that because what's a little bit of time? Anyway, you want to dissolve this completely and not have any particulate matter in there at all. So that takes a little bit of time, and you can swoosh it around, and just want to make sure that you don't have any more of the powder in there, because when you mix further on down the line, that can cause you problems. So bear with me while I get this all done. I think we're just about there. Reach off camera here and grab myself a little bit of paper towel. I like to keep everything clean, keep my stirring rods clean, keep everything wiped down so that there's no cross-contamination of chemistry. And there we go. I have a nice mixture here of the cadmium bromide, and it seems to be completely dissolved. So now, as I mentioned, we're going to need 60 milliliters of collodion. Now, I'm going to be measuring that out here in this jar, or in this graduated cylinder. Now, the collodion is capped with plastic with some of the bottles that you'll buy, especially from Mavidon, and that's just a safety feature because sometimes when ether sits around for a long time, it forms a precipitant that if you open it on a metal bottle, it can flare up. There have been incidences of that, but again, I'm just telling you the most scary things so that you're careful about this. But anyway, in these bottles, there's a little plastic plug in there. I pull that out. And now I'm going to be measuring out 60 milliliters of the collodion. And there I am, 60 milliliters. All right, so now I'm also going to want to add to that a little bit of ether, and I've got to put 40 milliliters in that, so that'll bring me up to 100 milliliters. I am doing that right now. Now, ether is very, very solvent and very, very aromatic. Some people really like it. Now, you can see when I'm dropping the ether in there, you see how it looks like cotton balls forming. Now, that's a little bit of the nitrocellulose coming out. I like to cap that back up. Now, with that, you just want to be able to mix that up until that all disappears, and it will disappear. It's kind of a fun part of this. It doesn't always happen. And if it doesn't happen, don't worry about it. So there, I've just got about all of it out of there. And now that that's all mixed up, I add into that my mixture of cadmium bromide and water. And again, you'll notice that perhaps there'll be a little bit of cottoning will start up in there. And there you go. There you have it. That's our part A, our collodion, our ether, and our cadmium bromide. Now what I like to do is take out my stirring rod, wipe it down, and take one of my pieces of paper and cover that up so that the evaporation doesn't get me all woozy. So now we're down to part B, and for that we're going to have to mix up a little bit of the ammonium iodide like we did in the first time with the cadmium bromide. So on this time we're going to need 1.25 milliliters of water once again. So I'm going to measure that out, and there we are right there. Oop, drop that down into our oh, actually this time I was going to use a little small beaker because I like to use this little one because I'm going to be using that one to measure something else with. So anyway, I got my little tiny beaker there. So we got our 1.25 milliliters. Now I'm going to fire up the scale once again and get my creased paper on top of there so that I can do the tare. There we go. Okay, now we're going for the ammonium iodide. Now ammonium iodide gives off a little bit more of an odor, and it's a little stinging, so I just like to keep my nose away. Again, don't go smelling this stuff up close. The smell is a little odd. You'll also see inside that it stains a little bit. Iodine stains a little bit, so that's why I keep it wrapped up in its little bag as well. So on this, we're going to be needing 1 gram. So here we go. There's a little bit too much. I'll take a little bit out and a little bit more out. Perfect. 1 gram. So then I set my spoon down, I seal up the ammonium iodide once again, and I get it back into its container, and I'm going to put that off to the side as well. Now, I have my mixture here. I have my ammonium iodide all weighed out here, 1 gram. It seems like a lot for such a small amount of water, but it does dissolve pretty quickly and easily. So in we go, and I once again safely dispose of the water, of the paper there. Now, if you can see this up close, you can see that it's going into solution pretty quick, and I really don't even need to stir it very much. And there we are. So I'll set that off to the side. Once again, wipe down my stirring rod, put that down, wipe off my spoon. I'm done with that. I'll dispose of that paper towel as well. Grab myself another piece here just in case. And now I am going to be measuring out 40 milliliters of the Everclear, which I'm going to do in this little beaker here. And there's my 40 milliliters of alcohol. And once again, I'm now going to take my cleared ammonium iodide and pour that into the alcohol. And take one of my stirring rods, stir that up nicely, and that's it. Part B solution is done. Now comes the fun part. I'm going to mix the Part B solution in with the Part A solution, and we're going to notice a little bit of change in color. It should go to a kind of a straw yellow, or if you'll excuse me, a little pea yellow kind of a look. So here we go. Now, as you'll notice, that color change is already starting to happen, but it's pretty slow. But what you will notice is that this is a very clear formula, hence the term quick clear. Now, the thing about that is, the name quick clear is, most collodions, when you mix them, especially the ones that use potassium iodide in place of the ammonium iodide, they tend to be a little cloudy in their mixture and a little bit more of precipitate inside of the collodion when you mix it up. So it's cloudy, and you can't use that right away. It basically needs to sit off on a shelf someplace. You close it up, sit it off on a shelf someplace, and let it clear and settle. And then before you use it, after sometimes up to a week, you will clear that, and it will be clear, and then you'll filter that out, and then it will be ready to use. Quick clear is much more fun and much easier to use for those of us who are a little bit more impatient, and also those of us who are beginners, because it's a very simple formula to do. Now, as you can see, as I'm talking to you, this is turning yellow. It's turning a brighter yellow. I don't know if you can see that, but it's showing me that our mixture is correct and that we've done a good job. Now, as I say, it's quick clear, and you're able to use it right away. Now, the thing is that while I could go pour a plate right now, it's not quite seasoned enough. I would wait a few hours, maybe even overnight, before I would use this. But in workshop situations and things like that, where I have to mix some up in a hurry, it's fine. I've used it right out of the mixture like this, and it's been fine. Now, another thing about collodion that you might be able to see is that it's a little thick. It's a little oily and a little thick, almost like syrup, not quite like maple syrup. But you'll notice that when we get on in one of our further videos when we do our pour-off. But anyway, for now, we're all set. Now, what I would do with this is take one of these bottles, and I like to use these sample bottles that you can buy online. I'll leave some links to places where you can buy the glassware online. Now, these bottles, they work very nice because they're plastic. They have a plastic rim on them. They seal very nicely. They're very easy to use when I'm pouring my collodion out onto my plates. They're good to use as a pour-off bottle. So anyway, these are just really nice, real heavy as well. I mean, they're glass, they will break, but I've dropped this a couple of times and it hasn't broken. So anyway, so now you can see, got a nice yellow color going on there. This collodion's ready to go. I'm going to pour it back into its own bottle here. Then normally what I do is, if I'm not pouring a lot of plates and I'm not planning on using this right away, I'll take a Sharpie and a white piece of tape and I'll mark on there, and I'll mark the date that it went in there. Now, one thing that you'll notice with collodion is that it's a nice yellow right now, but as time goes on, a week or two, it starts to darken, and even if it gets a little old, like when you get to like 3, 4, 5 weeks old, it'll turn kind of almost reddish. Now, people tend to call that like old red collodion, and as collodion ages, it gets a little more contrasty. So it's, as it ages and turns red, I wouldn't suggest throwing it away because it's still good for something. If there's a certain type of image that you want to do, or there's a really flat day, or some reason you want a lot of contrast, it's good to use. It's also good to use and save behind if you're going to be seasoning or exciting your bath in your silver nitrate, like I explained in the last video, where you need to take a new silver nitrate bath and you need to excite that bath. Old red collodion is fine for that. It doesn't have to be fresh collodion. But anyway, we have a nice fresh jar here, and we're going to be ready to pour some plates. Now, what I'm going to do is end this video here, and there'll be a part 3. And in the next video, I'm going to be mixing up 2 different chemicals that we use because they're very simple to mix up. And that will be the developer that we use to develop our plates after we've shot them, and also the fixture that we use. Now, I'll explain more about fix. Traditionally in fix, traditionally in the wet plate process, people have used potassium cyanide as a fix, but it's very dangerous, and I don't advise it at all for beginners or anyone even, really. I mean, it's not really that necessary. And what we use is a sodium thiosulfate fix, and that will be part of the next video as well. So this ends part 2. I hope you've gotten something out of it. I really appreciate you spending time with me. If you did like it, how about giving me a thumbs up down below? That always helps with YouTube. And perhaps you can subscribe if you haven't already. I'd love it if you would tell a friend that's interested in this process as well, because I'm going to be continuing these videos so that you can do this process at home. Again, so thanks very much, and I wish you good health and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.